Cedric, is it Kiefer?
Kiefer it is.
Kiefer. Oh gosh, that makes so much more sense. Um, from Informative, uh, beautiful work. Really interesting practice. I've seen some of the slides. It's gonna be gorgeous. So with that, Cedric, I will hand it over to you.
Wonderful. You can see my slides, right?
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Let's quickly confirm that. Perfect. Okay, yeah, I'm super happy to be here. Today, I want to talk a little bit about our work and how we shape new perspectives. And you might have noticed that I also changed the subtitle because I was to talk a little bit about how we embrace uncertainty, especially in times of constant change that undoubtedly we are currently have. Everything is changing, everything is moving, and how can we make the best out of it? Well, before I look into this, I want to tell you a little bit about onformative and who we are. We are a Berlin-based studio founded about 16 years ago by Julia Laub and myself, my business partner. And we have a team of about 8 to 10 people from different disciplines. This is usually the size that we have, but we also scale up and down depending on the projects. We have a great network of freelancers and external partners that we work with, depending on the projects that we're working on. The studio itself was founded after co-publishing the book about generative design. So this is a little bit our heritage and where we're coming from. The idea of using code, using technology to be creative, to express yourself, using algorithms, using data to be creative, create images, creating interactive applications. This is where we're coming from. And of course, we moved beyond that, but this is still very much where we're coming from and somehow part of everything that we do in one way or another, especially the thinking and the approach is still part of every project. The work that we do happens somewhere at the intersection of art, design, technology, and society. And I want to talk a little bit about more in a second what that means. But in a nutshell, we are trying to explore how we can unlock new creative possibilities through technology. How can we be creative, be more creative by using technology in our work? And we feel this is more and more important than ever because especially right now as boundaries blur and the pace of innovation accelerates, we feel this demands a new and holistic approach to design and creativity. And the work that we do is split between 4 different pillars. We do work that is experiential communication. We do generative systems and AI-driven narratives. We also work a lot on humanizing technology, which means designing the interfaces or every occasion where humans interact with technology in one way or another. And we also do strategic innovation and artistic research. And I'm going to go through some of these to tell you a little bit more about it and give you an idea of what this really means. Especially the experimental communication and spatial experiences is something that we have been doing a lot in the very beginning of the studio and still do a lot today. From the very beginning, we have been wondering how people interact and engage with technology and art in spaces. This is a project that we have been developing about 10 years ago, Anima Iki, as a research project where we had this large sphere or orb suspended from the ceiling, equipped with different sensors, microphones, and motion sensors, really detecting your presence in the space. It was reacting to you, and in return, you reacted to the piece. But interestingly, we never told anybody how to react to it or how to interact with it. And it was really interesting to observe how people used it completely different in different locations, different situations. By now, this piece has been exhibited in about 20 to 25 different spaces, from permanent installations in China to one-day events at festivals like South by Southwest or week-long exhibitions in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And every time people interact with it, they interact differently. At one place, they were lying on the floor looking up as if it would be a campfire. In other places, they realized that it's actually mimicking your motion and the sound that it captures in the space, and they try to manipulate it and interact and engage with it. So the moment you get closer, it starts to react and move and mimic your movement. And when you start moving around it, it starts following you. So some kids started to really run around it faster and faster and make it spin. And for us, it is really interesting to observe how, yeah, people interact with digital art in different situations, especially again, if you don't tell them how to interact with it. And we learn a lot from these projects and these observations. And this is also what we often then apply in our client projects when we ask a few more questions, such as how can immersive experiences also translate a brand core essence into emotional resonant storytelling? Because especially right now, the storytelling and the reason why you do things is getting more and more important. I mean, especially now in the age of AI, everybody is talking about intent. Why are we doing things? What's the reason behind it? And this has always been a really important part of our process. We were never in the beautiful image making business where we just created beautiful visuals, but there was always a reason behind why we do certain things, and also especially a strong focus on how we do it. And I want to share one project that we did a few years ago for Dolby Laboratories in San Francisco. So they have this beautiful screen in their lobby, and they invited us to create a piece that is somehow related to what they do, the company and the business. And they saw some of our previous work and they really liked it, and they asked us to do something similar. And if somebody asks us to do something similar, we usually do something different. But in this specific case, we felt, well, maybe we can do something similar, but look at it from a different perspective, because previously they got inspired by a dance piece that we created a few years earlier. So this time we started to think about maybe we don't look at the body and how it moves, but we look at the space and how the space is filled with energy. So changing the perspective on the piece. Usually these projects start with research, where we, let's say, write our software. And in this specific case, we also wanted to make it based on motion data. So the initial research started with capturing motion data from different athletes and performers, looking how the energy flows through the body when moving, how the different muscles are activated, but again, especially also how the energy is spreading into the space and is filling the space. And there was one really interesting moment when recording these data sets and talking to the dancers and performers. They mentioned one specific moment in their performance when they started to really focus on their performance and their creative work. A moment when everything starts to fade out and blur away because they're completely immersed in performing and dancing. And we really like this idea of being completely immersed in the creative process, because that's what it's all about. That's what creativity is about. You're completely in the moment and everything else fades out. So we really like the idea of making this the topic of the piece itself. So what we did was, instead of seeing this as a screen, we interpreted as a window into this abstract world. How does it feel to be completely immersed in the creative process? So what you see here is the motion data visualized in a really abstract way. Sometimes you have a split second where you see a silhouette of a body come to the screen, but then also quickly disappearing again in the distance. And this is this idea of capturing the feeling of being creative and yeah, being immersed in the creative process. And using this principle, we created these different visual aesthetics that we're playing on this video wall in the lobby of Dolby. And it is, of course, because it's Dolby, not only about visuals, it's also very much about sound. And they have a beautiful setup of 64 speakers, and you can really make sound travel. And we really thought about how we would do the sound for this piece, because the usual way of doing it, it would probably be having a final visual piece, handing it over to a sound designer, and let them do the sound score on top. But we really wanted to stay true to the original concept and the idea of being immersed and really spontaneously react and improvise and let go. And what we did was literally putting 3 cello players inside of this abstract world in different locations. So through VR, they were placed at different points in this abstract world and were spontaneously reacting and performing to what they felt, what they experienced. The moment there was a wave clashing from the left to the right, you could really tell how the cello player who was on the left picked it up first, and then the second one reacted, and then the third one reacted. And this led to a really, honest and really true and emotional response and soundscape that we truly believe you wouldn't get otherwise. And it's definitely not the easiest way to create music, absolutely not. But we also really believe if you want to do things differently, or if you want to get different results, you need to do things differently. That's the only way to get something new. And it really worked. And I'm going to share with you a shortcut of the final piece, how it was exhibited and still is from time to time in the San Francisco lobby of the Dolby headquarters. So as I just mentioned, it's a lot about the stories that you're telling, and for this specific piece, it's not only the visual stories, but it's also really the making of, the behind the scenes, the reason why that makes the piece. And when talking about storytelling, we also often use data to tell stories. That's what we call the data-driven storytelling, when we use data as a source of inspiration. And for some clients and for some projects, it feels really easy because it's a data company. For example, we have been working with IBM, creating a data sculpture for the IoT center in Munich, a data chandelier that is suspended from the ceiling, that is visualizing the data from the building. It's an IoT center, so they have a lot of sensors tracking the visitor flow, the temperature, the network traffic, and all of this. And this is visualized in an abstract, artistic way on these ribbons. But then there's also the second screen in the back that tells you a little bit more about what you're looking at and the exact data and so on. So there are these two layers or two ways to approach this. One is the more abstract, emotional way, and the other one is the more informal, when you really need to get some information or want to find out more about it. And especially working on content and artworks for these commercial spaces is something that we have been doing a lot in the past for different companies and different clients. One that we have been also finishing a few years ago, also together with some of the folks on the call right now, is a project that we did for the Discovery District of AT&T in Dallas. We created content for the large-scale media facade outside on the Discovery District, but we also developed a second piece for the lobby, actually. It's a beautiful lobby, and the whole lobby is full of screens, screen columns, screen walls. And again, we wanted to make sure that we're not interpreting this just as screens, putting content on it, but really think about a concept that would transform the space in an architectural sense. And again, when we create content for clients, for brand spaces, we really look for the stories that are worth telling. And we had the idea of, or the moment we started to talk to AT&T and also through these other projects and started to develop concepts, we realized that it's a really fascinating company. I mean, they literally invented the telephone about 140 years ago. They have endless amounts of inventions. They own over 50,000, I believe, patents of all kinds. And we really like this idea of not having the patents hidden in their archives, but really show them to everybody who's visiting AT&T. So we developed the idea and concept of the knowledge archive. The knowledge archive is every patent of AT&T visualized in an abstract way in a shelf. And the screens are the shelves. And we did this by really analyzing all the patents, by scanning them using AI technology, and capturing different data about the length of the patent, the year it was actually submitted, the number of contributors, the images attached to it. And these different data points were then used to drive multiple procedural setups that we developed to create unique individual patent objects that were placed inside of the shelf. And each one was unique and different and defined by the individual patent that it was representing. And the installation itself was going through two different modes. One was the discovery mode, where you really were able to walk around, look at all the different objects. Then there's also a second mode when the whole space is transforming and you have these hero objects shown a little bit bigger. And you also have the QR code and you can scan it and you can find out a little bit more about this individual patent and what it meant and how it changed technology. And this is really a different way of telling a brand story in a much more approachable or more explorative way. And these are the stories that we love telling. And the question I often get asked is, how do you find these stories? And of course, you have to look for them. And you find stories everywhere. And often you find them through patterns, or how you might say these days, looking for signals in noise. So there's always something interesting to tell, but it's always something different. And I want to share another project that we developed a few years ago for a cultural and commercial center in Shanghai. And we got invited to create a digital art piece for the inside and outside screens of the building. And the only thing that they asked us to do is do something about the city, something about Shanghai. And we started to look into what Shanghai is about, but also what cities are about. And we started to look at cities from different perspectives. And of course, one thing that you quickly realize is there are certain patterns that you see. Cities are based out of blocks. They are blocks of streets and houses. And if you change your perspective, not looking at it from a top-down view, but if you look up from the street level, you find similar structures also on the building facades. And we really like this idea of using this as inspiration to drive a procedural pattern generator that was picking up different latitude, longitude information from Shanghai and turn that into always changing, always evolving structures. And what you see here is one of the two modes that we developed. It's the day mode. The day mode is generating these structures based out of the data sets and then changes it with a lot of light and shadow, and it's changing over the course of the day. But then towards the end of the day, during night, the same patterns are interpreted completely differently in a much more vibrant way, inspired by the vibrant nightlife and neon light of such cities such as Shanghai. And I'm also going again, sharing with you a short cut of one of the screens inside of the building and the content. And as everything is evolving, we are also now slowly moving forward and going from data-driven to AI-augmented storytelling. And I want to talk a little bit about what I mean by this. And a good example is one of the pieces that we created 2 years ago for High House. It's a location, a restaurant at one of the highest buildings in Singapore at the Bay Area. So you have a beautiful view over the Bay Area because it's located in the top floor. And once again, we took inspiration from the city and the facades, and also how light actually is reflecting over the course of the day, when the sky color is changing and the glass facades are tinted in multiple different colors. And initially, it started as one of these data-driven pieces where we took the information from the sky by capturing it with different cameras, analyzing color sets, and then using it to drive the algorithms to tint the colors of the art pieces. But we, at one point, felt this isn't right, or it didn't feel right to us because it completely misses the relation of the space, and the time, and in general the feeling that you have when looking at a sky and a sunset and a sunrise. It's just a little bit too digital and a little bit too cold, and we felt this needs to be a little bit more emotional, because there's something that you feel when you see a sky and the sun piercing through the clouds. And we recorded the sky each day and have data sets of completely different skies, and looking at each one of these, you feel something different, you see something different. And we thought, okay, well, let's bring AI into the game and ask AI what it feels and what it sees. So we had a large language model looking at these sky sets and write short poems about it, and each individual poem is interpreting really what you see, not only picking up the color, but also the cloud formation and just the general feeling. And we used these individual poems and superimposed them on top of the artwork once in a while. And what we learned through this is that by using technology or even using AI, you can make something feel more emotional and more human and more personal. And that's a really interesting learning also for us, because it's a topic that everybody is talking about. So again, and it's probably something we will talk about later, it's always about how you use a certain tool, and not the tool itself. And what I shared with you right now is especially these large scale bespoke spatial experiences that we do quite a lot, but we also work on much smaller screens, and instead reaching millions. So one of the projects or long-term collaborations I want to also talk a little bit about is our work for Samsung. For the last 9 years, we have been working closely with Samsung, developing all the ambient artworks for more or less all of their TVs and devices, from the QLEDs to the Zero to the micro LED walls and so on. And we have been developing over 60 different contents with different topics. Some were more abstract, some were more concrete, but all of them are actually real-time content. So we are not talking about images or videos, but we are talking about procedurally generated real-time contents that are also often reacting and responding and changing based on data, such as this one, which is changing the appearance based on the weather in the location that the TV is used. So everybody gets something different. Or this piece, which is slowly moving and changing the speed of the movement based on the wind speed. So these are data driven, but also in a really subtle way. But that makes it, again, so much more important and more relevant. And you also at one point start to use them as an ambient information display, because you also start to realize and understand how to decode the information. And we have been doing more of these on different devices for different topics, and also moved from TVs to other screens, doing also a lot of mobile phone content. And again, for these mobile phone contents, it's not about doing an image or a video, but these are all real time, either developing generative wallpapers that are unique for you, based on your personal data, or also wallpapers that constantly change and evolve based on your phone app usage. So this one is, for example, changing and growing the more you use the phone, and also changing color depending on the apps that you use. And this is what it's really about. Even if this is a really small example, it shows how important it is to create unique content and customize content and experiences. And one of the reasons why we are good partners to develop such projects is our expertise that allows us to translate such creative visions into technical solutions, because we usually do everything from the very beginning, where we start concepting and designing, up to the point where we also do the development and the final implementation. So also when it comes to these large scale installations, we are on site setting things up, but also when working with Samsung, for example, we work closely with the developers in Seoul, really solving their problems and making sure that everything runs on these devices. And that's where this unique knowledge or combination of design expertise and development expertise is also so important, because you can only design things if you also know how they work under the hood. And I really want to make another example talking about these contents, because again, these are not videos. All of these are developed as small applications. Some are asset-based, and then they are procedurally generated and reshuffled. And some are actually simulating 3D scenes in 2D. Some are completely procedural, no assets at all, but completely generative and always different. Some are timeline based, but then influenced by external data sets or music reactive. And each one of these is a special small design tool, which, by the way, is also something that we've been doing a lot, building generative design tools. So this idea of building systems is something that is really important to us. That's also what I meant by we're not doing beautiful images only. We are always thinking about the idea behind it, the process behind it, and how to make it work. And this becomes really valuable, not only for us, but also for our clients that we support by doing research and also advising them with their projects. And we do this through strategic innovation and artistic research. And this is getting, again, more and more important these days, because we believe that these new type of devices also require new type of contents and new type of interaction models. The devices of the future are adaptable. They have vision. They're getting smart. They can respond. They're mobile. They can move around. And it requires a completely different way of interacting with them. It often requires a completely new language to talk to them. And we have been exploring this and looking into this together with our partners through some confidential projects. I cannot share what we actually did, but I can talk about the project on the top level. So we have been working again with Samsung, moving from developing contents to really thinking about how they develop their products of the future, thinking about Bally, the household robot that is equipped with a projector and sensors and moves through your home. And how does it actually communicate and talk to you? Maybe just through motion or through LEDs. Because again, it's about developing a language, because there are thousands of human languages in this world, and we also believe there are as many ways of communicating with technology. And we ask ourselves and try to answer the question together with our clients and partners, how we can create a more positive and inclusive relationship and communication with technology. And again, there's so many different cases that are all different. Another project we have been working on with General Motors is thinking about how do autonomous cars communicate with pedestrians when they don't see them, or there are nobody sitting inside of the car. What is the visual language that is understood across cultures? But then on the other hand, also, how is maybe in-car experience changing when you're not driving anymore? Do you have some AI travel companions that join you on your journey? And then, of course, recently we also have been thinking a lot about how do AI assistants really communicate? How do they look like? How do they express themselves, and so on? And when we work with such companies, of course, we work with brilliant people. That was some of the smartest people we ever worked with. And you might wonder, why do they ask us to kind of like help and support them? And the reason is because we bring a new perspective in. We look at these things a little bit differently. And this is really valuable. And this turned out to be really helpful for them. And the idea of changing your perspective became more and more important for us. And I also want to share one of our early research projects that we developed a few years ago, where the idea of changing perspective is a really important one, or is maybe even the source of inspiration. And this project is called Meandering River. Meandering River started as a research project, or let's say it started with an inspiration that came from some satellite images that I was stumbling upon after looking for some other projects references. And there was something that I loved about these rivers and these shapes and how they meander through the landscape. And I never really thought about it, but there's something really beautiful about it. And this is the fact that they really move through the landscape. And of course, you don't see it if you stand by a river. How could you? Because you don't have the right perspective. You need to change your perspective in two ways. You need to change your perspective location-wise. You need to look at it from the top, but even then you don't see it moving. You also need to change your perspective time-wise, because only if you look at it over the course of 10, 20, 30 years, you can really see it moving. And it's moving because of sediment and water pressure. And it's really interesting how this thing really starts to meander through the landscape. And the moment we see something like this that inspires us, we try to understand it. We really try to replicate it. And that's a really interesting part of our process, really trying to understand things and decode them and deconstruct them to reassemble them. And of course, it doesn't start like that. But it starts again with an open exploration, trying to look at how can we simulate such river movements, and do we visualize it as a river, or do we maybe colorize it based on the water pressure, or maybe do we visualize the water's flow itself by using particle simulation, or maybe ignore the river completely and only visualize the landscape around it and how it changes, or maybe go one step further, not visualizing the river itself, but just the connection points, and then color it over time and don't erase it. And it immediately starts to change, because at this point, it's not a river anymore. It starts to become a digital brush on a virtual canvas. The river transforms into something different. And this is a really beautiful idea, because now you start to make it something unique, something you can use, you can really reinterpret. And we started to think about, how would we interpret this? What would we do with this? And the very first idea we had was we wanted to create a physical sculpture, something that is created over the course of centuries and just frozen in time. And we really liked this idea, but then also realized that it's also so much about the motion and this idea of unpredictability and constant change, that we really wanted to make this a motion video piece or real-time piece. And we started to look for inspiration, but we also didn't look far, because while looking at these satellite images, we also came across so many beautiful landscapes that already looked so painterly on its own. So what we did was developing this further, recreating or being inspired by these visuals, creating multiple different procedural setups inspired by different landscapes around the world. And this, in the end, became a real-time piece, audiovisual art installation that was constantly running. Again, unpredictable, because you never really know what the river looks like the next moment. Is it connecting? Is it changing? And that's the beauty of this piece. And when working on this, we also really knew that we want to put the emphasis on sound and music. And once again, we teamed up with Kling Klang Klong sound design studio from Berlin to really think about how can we create a music for a piece that is unpredictable, but that we also wanted to have this human touch. We always had this idea of this piano play. And that was 2017, so about 8 years ago, when we first started to think about AI as a co-creator, really thinking about how we can use AI in the creative process. And once again, we started to look at this project from a different perspective, because if you think about it, there are two more perspectives to it, because there's also the human perspective, what you see the rivers, you see the valleys, the landscape changing, but then there's also the second perspective, the data perspective that the machine sees. How long is the river? What is the water pressure? where are the points, what is the length. And all this information is really, really valuable, because what we wanted to do is we wanted to teach the machine how a human would interpret such a visual in certain moments. And what you need to do when you want to teach a machine something is collecting training data. So we started to collect different training data by having different piano players interpreting these different visual aesthetics in different multiple ways. So I believe 5 different piano players were interpreting these 10 different styles in 3 different tempos. And they were really spontaneously playing what they saw. And these MIDI recordings were then used to train the AI through Google Magenta, which is machine learning for music creation, to understand and learn how a human would play in certain situations. And based on this, we got multiple MIDI compositions, beautiful compositions, some really simple, some over complex because we overtrained. But this was, again, the starting point for us to continue the soundscape development and turning this into a real-time setup. Because again, this is not about prompting something, getting an output and call it done. This is really about using AI in the creation process as a co-creator, as a source of inspiration. And I'm going to quickly share with you the first time we exhibited this piece in Funkhaus Berlin a few years ago. By now, it has been exhibited about 50 times all over the world. Even today, it's exhibited in Prague. So super happy to see this still being shown. And of course, you need to ask yourself what comes next. And if the AI becomes the creator, what does it mean for the human in the creative process? Are we becoming the curator? And this is the question that we have been thinking about since then. And that led us to start another research project about 5 years ago, 2020, or probably even earlier, because that's when it was partly released. That also got inspired by the old masters working in their workshops. Because if you think about it, they also never really created everything on their own. They had a lot of assistants, people working for them. That's something that we really liked about the idea of AI co-creation. But there was also another aspect, which maybe 5 years ago wasn't discussed as much as it discussed today. And that's the fact of the process. Again, if you use AI tools, especially generative AI and prompt and image, you really don't know what's happening in between. And we really always like the idea of the process being part of the end piece. The fact that you see the tool leaving marks and being responsible for the output is something that we believe is really strong and really important. So we again started a research project by really simply developing AI agents in a 2D way that start to learn sculpting. So on the right side, you see a pixel block, and on the left, you see a reference. And the AI is the red dot that try to get as close as possible to the reference. And through reinforcement learning, we were teaching the AI agents to be as efficient as possible by having punishments and rewards. Because if you delete a pixel, you get a reward. If you delete too many, you get punished. And by learning these strategies, the AI started to move diagonal. And you can tell that this dot actually looks more like a diagonal line. And this is already visible in the end result and shape of the object. And we really love that even in a simple way like this, these strategies influence the outcome. And we developed this further, turning it into a 3D setup where the AI started to also switch between different tools. And as always, when working with AI, it's a lot about training. So here we started different training sessions, multiple ones, having the AI agent training over different weeks and really learning how to sculpt. And during this time, we also changed once more the perspective on things by taking a look at what the AI thinks and sees. So here we were actually visualizing the confidence of the AI while sculpting. And we also visualized the past of the AI over time. And this really allowed us to take on the perspective of the AI and see through the eyes of the AI. But yeah, after a while, things got a little bit more concrete, and we ended up with really human-like shapes. And of course, we probably could have taken it further, but we also stopped it at this point because we were not after perfection. We really like this roughness and abstraction. And especially also the fact that you can still see the tools that have been used, a spherical tool on the left or a box tool on the right. And you can also still see these marks that the tool leaves by moving up and down. And that puts us in the situation of judging a lot of outputs. We had a lot of results, and we were in the situation of really deciding what to do with this, and also wondering what is actually the end result of this project. Is it a sculpture that we're like 3D printing or sculpting? Or is it maybe the way that we document it? And we realized it's actually all of this. It is not only the final selection of the sculptures, but it's also the process. So we also published a scientific paper about the process behind it. And we started to think about how we exhibit it in virtual spaces. So we also really took on the role of a curator exhibiting these pieces, but then also in a way that we were able to tell the story, turning this into a short film that was really telling the story of the creation of these pieces. And I'm going to share with you a short version of this film. And at this point, we really started to also rethink the creative process, really rethinking about how creativity and also the tools that we're using need to evolve, and thinking about new generative AI tools and strategies for a completely new design process, but also maybe thinking about how inspiration is changing. And this also came through collaboration and work on some other project with design teams from the automotive industry, working with them on some car projects, and telling us about how they design cars and how they put forms and materials together. But then we also had great conversations with teams at Nike who worked on new products, and they were all doing the same thing. They took references and inspiration from everywhere. And if you think about it, where's inspiration coming from? Inspiration is, of course, based on everything that you see, that you learned, that you experienced, your cultural background. And if you think about it, it's your training set. It's what you have been trained on. And we really liked this idea, and once again wondered, can we bring in another perspective? And if you think about like a classical creative process, you start with a piece of clay, and you form it and you shape it, and it starts to look different. There's maybe one moment where you feel that this shape reminds you of something. You start to move around, you maybe look closer, and there's the point where you see something in it. Maybe it feels like a new piece of a car or maybe a new shoe, depending on what you're also focusing on. And we really liked this idea, and we really thought about, can we create a new digital workflow and tool for inspiration and exploration, and maybe bring AI in, yeah, and again, not as the creator, but as the co-creator in this process, or as a source of inspiration. So we built this AI inspiration tool, where you are looking at this object and you might see something inside of it, but then you ask the AI what the AI sees in it, and the AI interprets it. And it's not so much about getting like a final design or anything. It's really more about getting another perspective. Maybe you saw something completely different in it, and just this external extra input maybe helps you to rethink or to maybe consider another idea. And this little bit of input can already be enough to push yourself forward. And maybe it also introduces a new way of navigating and exploring inspiration. And of course, depending on what you're looking at, you can also tailor it towards specific domains. If you're looking at fashion design and want to look into futuristic materials and fabrics, you can get different outputs compared to when looking at a car interior and look for leather seats and something similar. Then you can get these type of outputs. And again, this is a pretty good example that this is not about designing a final design, because it's far away from being usable, but it helps you to get some inspiration. And this is really, again, valuable for us and helpful for us, but not also for us, but also for all of our clients that we work with, because we work together with them on solving their creative problems through design innovation together, through these like iterative design sessions. And we do this with tech companies, and we do it in a lot of digital ways, but this approach is really applicable to anything. One of the recent research projects we started is about material innovation, and it's going all the way back to generative design, but then also thinking about how we can use this in different contexts. And again, it started with exploring how data can drive different algorithms, but yeah, to generate patterns and colors and designs for aesthetic reasons, but then also how these patterns can be used to transform and change material properties, and how these new materials can in the end also inform new products, and how we can go from 2D to 3D, and a 2D changing algorithm can generate some 3D structure that is then also controlled by different data sets, like pressure maps to control density in certain areas, which could again then inform new shoe soles. And this type of thinking is also what we mean by bringing in a new perspectives, because we can we get input from so many different sources. Everything that we do, from these spatial experiences and the data-driven work, and everything that we see and do, is always fueling these other projects. And I'm going to share a short reel and cut of this research project with you. And again, why do we do all this? For us, this is a lot about connecting and sharing our knowledge. And we do this through these collaborations and projects together with our clients and partners, but it's also very much about talking to others. I do this a lot at talks and conferences, but I also love doing it online with communities like Futurespaces, because in the end, the goal is to transform these shared insights into really meaningful collaborations. I want to get to know new people. We want to work and collaborate with new people. We really want to create amazing work together, find solutions, and create experiences together. So really, thank you very much for listening and spending time with me. And please reach out if you got inspired and want to talk. Thank you very much.
All right. Cedric, thank you so much. I'm going to actually drop that in the chat here. So we're actually we ran a little bit long, which is totally, I mean, it was brilliant. I honestly could
I'm
not have loved
sorry.
it more. Oh no, 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 absolutely not a problem. I think we probably have time for like one question. Anybody want to go
Oh,
camera
oh
on and
shit.
ask the question? We will find another time to
Choose
keep it
wisely,
going.
but you can also always reach out to me afterwards. No question.
All right, fantastic. Okay, Harrison, you had a question.
All right. Incredibly inspiring. The way you folks think about the world and see the world is just wild. My question for you, because of that perspective, I can't even imagine asking some of the questions that you folks have had to ask yourselves with the river and all that. What if you could name like a book or maybe three books that kind of helped you think the way that you do or see the world that you do, that would be really helpful.
I mean, even if it is almost 20 years ago, I really take a lot of inspiration from the whole generative design thinking and approach. And I mean, I want to recommend you the book that we co-published, especially Julia, but also just everything that happens or happened during this time is really helpful and inspiring. And why I feel it's so important is also because even today, um, while I mean I'm not coding myself any longer. I'm completely detached from really creating, but everything that I learned could still be applied. Technology is evolving, but the core principles stay the same, and they probably won't change. And this is still helping me a lot. And I believe this is also the really big benefit that we have, our generation that learned it the hard way by spending nights coding and exploring, but now are able to use the new tools, maybe the AI tools, because I always wonder, how are all these designers telling an AI what to do and how to do it when vibe coding, when they never really experienced it themselves? And I cannot directly communicate you, recommend you a book. I mean, a lot of this information that I got came from communities. I spend a lot of time on in the online communities of processing, but then also conferences, listening to a lot of talks. I mean, you guys have about 100 talks online. Probably that's a really valuable resource. Um, but let me think about it. Maybe reach out by mail, and I can look something up that might be helpful to get started.
Yeah, and I would say, Cedric, also, if you think about it later and you want to send it over my way, I'd be happy to distribute it. I'll give a shout out. If you're talking about processing, look up Casey Reyes's work, and he does a lot of, he teaches a lot at UCLA. I'll drag him out on one of these things, one of these days. He's
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So Cedric, we're at time. But I guess what would be really great is like I would love to know. I'm sure people have questions or follow-ups. Like, how can they reach you? How can they contact you? How can they support you? I'll let you sign it off with that.
Well, I was mostly excited about the conversations at the end, but it was my own fault. I'm so
Oh,
sorry for that.
we can plan another time if you want. No, never a problem.
But again, please reach out, and even if it's just for having a chat, I would love to connect with all of you, because I was mostly looking at my slides and not at you guys. Well, if you can still see my screen, the best reaching out is through the website, through LinkedIn or Instagram. If you Google my name, you find my email and my LinkedIn. Please connect, and yeah, would love to hear from you.
All right, amazing, Cedric. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for joining us here today. This is like honestly, I also have so many questions, so maybe we'll figure out a follow-up session. Love the work. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hope to see you next week at a future Spaces. All right, see you, everybody. Thanks so much, Cedric.
Thank you guys. Bye bye.